The cough had a clock. It started after the dishes were stacked to dry, after the television had said its last stubborn things, after the radiator pipes clicked twice, like someone adjusting a bracelet in the next room. It started when the building took a deeper breath and the street quieted. That's when Maya coughed, small shoulders jerking, a sound that made her eyes water and her mother's back stiffen as if she were catching the cough with her spine. Outside their duplex in Cleveland's Slavic village, January pressed its face to the windows. The wind made a sound in the ductwork as if it were deciding whether to stay for coffee. In the girl's bedroom, a poster of a purple pony curled at the edges from the damp. The window they'd plastic-wrapped in November sagged now like tired skin. On the dresser sat a plastic nebulizer and a lined notebook where her mother, Lena Ortiz, kept track of medicine doses and how many times the cough woke them. "Slow breaths," Lena whispered, lifting the mask to Maya's nose, counting in a voice that she didn't use for anyone else. She'd learned to be precise. 4 puffs of albuterol, spacer attached, a minute between puffs, a 10-minute wait, then the nebulizer if the wheeze stuck around like a rude guest. She did the steps the clinic nurse had taught her and the YouTube videos had reinforced. She learned to turn the kitchen fan on low, to pull the steam away when she boiled noodles, because someone on a forum had said the steam can build into mold. She even wiped the bathroom ceiling with vinegar on Sundays. But every night, after the pipes clicked, the cough came back. It lived in the room like a tenant with no lease. At first, the clinic said colds. It was January, everyone's kids were coughing. Then it was likely asthma, which felt like an accusation Lena couldn't rebut. She quit burning the cheap candles she bought at the bodega. She moved the cat, Zuzu, into the kitchen at night and vacuumed twice a week, even when the vacuum's belt squealed and left that burnt rubber smell in the hall. She bought a HEPA filter on a payment plan and set it to medium. The cough kept its schedule. On the 3rd urgent care visit in 6 weeks, a resident came in. A young man with a name tag that read Ethan Shah, MD, and dark crescents under his eyes that said he knew what 2 in the morning felt like. He sat, which surprised her. Doctors usually stood and spoke in tight sentences that floated up. Sitting meant he intended to be with the gravity in the room. "Ms. Ortiz," he said, glancing at Maya, "tell me all the places your daughter coughs." "Here," Lena said. "At night." "School." "Not much. Her teacher says she coughs after recess if it's cold." "Grandma's." "At my cousin's place in Parma." "No. She fell asleep on their couch during a movie and didn't cough once." Lena heard her voice and realized it had that brittle brightness people use when they're trying not to sound scared. Dr. Shah tilted his head. "Does the cough sound different here? Barky? Dry?" "It sounds like a little engine that won't start," Lena said, and then felt foolish. "And then like paper rubbing together in her chest." He didn't smile at her description. He nodded. "How old is the building?" he asked. "As old as the busted mail boxes," Lena said, and surprised herself with a laugh she hadn't planned. "The landlord says 1910, give or take 100 years. The doctor's smile was small and tired, the kind given to a teammate. He listened to Maya's lungs, pressing the diaphragm of the stethoscope to her back in 4 practiced places. He asked Maya to blow out as if blowing candles. He peered at the inside of her nose and made a note about boggy turbinates that meant nothing to Lena and everything to his training. He pulled out a simple peak flow meter. The straw and gauge toy, he said, would help her see how hard Maya could push air out when she felt tight. And then he surprised Lena again. "Where do you sleep?" he asked. "In the small room off the hall," Lena said. "We share." Where is the gas furnace?" "In the basement under our room," Lena said. "It rattles a little when it goes on. It's one of those old ones that growls, you know?" She mimicked the sound without meaning to. "Who heats with the oven?" "Excuse me?" Dr. Shah's eyes lifted. "Anyone in the building ever use the gas oven for heat? Open the door to warm the kitchen when the thermostat can't keep up?" Lena looked at him the way you look at a person who's looked at your life too directly. I leave it open sometimes while I'm making tortillas, not to heat the place, just to keep the kitchen from feeling like a meat locker." He nodded and wrote something. "Do you ever smell anything sweet, like solvent, or like a garage when you open the door?" "Sometimes in the stairwell," Lena said, "when the downstairs neighbor sands furniture. He sells dresses on Facebook. Why?" "Just mapping the air," he said, as if that were a normal thing. He turned back to Maya. "I'm going to set you up with a controller inhaler in addition to the rescue inhaler. 2 puffs morning and night. Rinse your mouth after. And I want you to try something very low-tech. Move Maya's mattress into the living room for 3 nights and sleep with the window cracked, just a finger. See if the cough changes. I'm not diagnosing your building," he added quickly. "I'm just trying to figure out if the air changes from room to room." He didn't scold. He didn't say, "You should have." He said, "Where do you sleep?" And Lena felt both seen and scolded by the question itself, because she'd been so busy trying to be a good mother in all the visible ways, food, homework, hair tucked before school, that she hadn't thought to map the air. She did exactly what he said. She dragged the mattress into the living room and cracked the window. The night was loud with tires on wet snow and someone arguing softly on a phone. Maya curled with Zuzu tucked at her feet and coughed once, then slept. At 3, Lena woke and lay listening for the engine cough. Silence. She cried into the pillow without moving, as if a gesture might wake the sleeping problem. The 3rd night, the cough came back, softer. The radiator clanged, and the plastic on the window in the bedroom sighed, even though the door to the bedroom was closed. Lena wrote it all down in the notebook. She called the number on the magnet Dr. Shah had given her. A community health worker named Tasha called back and used a tone Lena associated with teachers who loved their jobs. "You're doing it right," Tasha said. "We'll see you in clinic Tuesday." The clinic visit felt like walking into a machine that had learned their names. Tasha took copies of the notebook pages and asked about the building again. "Any leaks behind the sink?" she asked. "Any dark spots on the ceiling?" "Painted," Lena said. "Everything is painted like they wanted to turn problems into scenery." Tasha looked at Dr. Shah. "There's a healthy homes program. If we can get a referral approved, someone can do a home visit." Dr. Shah nodded, but his mouth did that small, tight thing when doctors think about policy. "It's an old house," he said. "Old furnace, maybe a flue issue. Could be nitrogen dioxide from the stove. Could be mold behind walls. Could be a combo meal." "Combo meal?" Maya echoed, smiling for the first time that day. "Yeah," Dr. Shah said, grinning at her, "like when the air serves you things you didn't order." They adjusted the doses. He showed Lena how to tell when the rescue inhaler was running low, how to count, how to log. He asked again about the neighbor sanding furniture, about odors in the stairwell, about how often the furnace filter got changed. "What filter?" Lena said, and his pen paused. He told her he was going to push for the home visit. What he did not say was that sometimes the referral machines were slow and the winter faster. What he did not say was that he'd seen kids whose coughs were maps of their zip codes. What he did not say was that he had a feeling he couldn't shake, the kind of feeling that followed him into his sleep. Lena went home. She kept the window cracked and the heat higher to compensate and saw the electric bill climb like ivy. The cough had quieter nights and then came back, stubborn as math. In March, when the snow receded to blackened piles and the mailboxes leaned at their traditional angles, the landlord, Mr. Klein, sent a handyman to seal drafts. The handyman squeezed foam around the window frames and told Lena she'd thank him in April. He didn't look at the basement. "I need someone to look at the heater," Lena said. "Lady, the heater's older than my mother," he said cheerfully. "Still kicking." "Like my kid's cough," Lena said. He shrugged and sealed the gap where the baseboard met the floor behind the bunk bed, the place where the wall had looked faintly shadowed all winter. The foam smelled sweet and industrial and made Lena want to open every window to let it argue with the February air. She wrote it down in the notebook. Foam behind bed, sweet smell, cough worse, 1 a.m., 4 a.m. Dr. Shah called twice and left messages. Tasha called once more and spoke with Lena, who reported honestly. Better when in the living room, worse when the window plastic crackled, better at her cousin's. Tasha said the home visit might take a few months. A few months sounded like a half joke and half threat. Then life did that thing where it stacked emergencies. Lena's hours at the bakery where she prepped dough got cut, so she took shifts at the laundromat on Fleet where the dryers made a hot wind of lint. Her mother in Lorraine fell and bruised her hip. Lena took 2 Sundays to drive her to Mass and back because her mother said the pews were the only chairs that listened. School asked for a meeting about Maya's reading, and Lena managed to be cheerful and promising instead of afraid. The cough kept time, the medicine kept routine. Spring made an appearance in a blue crocus near the stoop and then retreated. Dr. Shah's number stayed on the fridge. By June, the cough had mostly emptied itself out into the open windows, as if summer had negotiated a truce, and Lena allowed herself to believe that maybe kids cough in winter, and in summer they run, and maybe that was all this had ever been. She put the notebook in the drawer with the oven mitts and breathed like a woman on vacation in her own small kitchen. She didn't see Dr. Shah again that summer. She didn't know that on a July evening, after a long shift in the ER, he sat on his stoop in Tremont and read a paper about nitrogen dioxide from gas stoves and nocturnal cough in children, and felt the kind of plain anger that good men sometimes feel when a simple problem keeps its disguise. He wrote a name on the top line of a legal pad, Maya Ortiz. Under it, in block letters, he wrote, "Where do you sleep?" Then he circled it as if to keep the question from running away. He came back in September on a Tuesday that started grey and decided to stay that way. He didn't call first. He brought a woman from the city health department, Ms. Monique Reeves, whose orange canvas bag held instruments that looked like toys and did not act like toys. He brought Tasha, the community health worker, whose voice made doorways polite. He brought no judgment and a clipboard. He knocked, as if asking permission to bring the weather inside. Lena opened the door and for a half-second felt irrational relief, the way you feel when the person who understands your problem appears without your having to explain it. Then embarrassment, because it had been months. And what if she had made a fuss over a winter thing that had gone away? Then a sudden shame, because the sink had a bowl and a pan in it, and the house smelled faintly of last night's onions. Then the defensive tilt of the chin that women learn without meaning to. "We are fine." "Ms. Ortiz," Dr. Shah said, "we're here to do a home assessment if you're okay with that. It's voluntary. You can put us right back on the porch with no hard feelings." "Come in," Lena said before pride could answer. "Come in and prove I'm not crazy, or prove I am, and I'll make coffee." Maya was at school. Zuzu surveyed the visitors with the look of a creature that owns the lease and the mortgage. "Ms." Reeves set the orange bag on the table and took out a small pump with test strips, a handheld monitor that beeped when it found what it was looking for, a humidity gauge, a flashlight more interested in corners than in room centers, and a camera that blinked softly like a patient eye. "What are we measuring?" Lena asked, halfway hoping the answer would be everything. "Humans are very leaky," Ms. Reeves said cheerfully. "Buildings too. We'll test for carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, relative humidity, surface moisture, temperature differentials. We'll look for hidden mold. We'll check your furnace flue. I brought an infrared thermometer. We'll draw a little airplane map of your air." Tasha laughed. "She makes it sound like a field trip," she said, "and the truth is, it kind of is." They started in the kitchen. Ms. Reeves turned on the gas stove and watched the monitor. The beep went from polite to opinionated in 30 seconds. "NO2 spike," she said, and held the screen where Lena could see the numbers climb. "That's nitrogen dioxide. It irritates airways. When you opened the oven to warm the kitchen." "I stop now," Lena said quickly, as if she'd been caught. "I only do it if my hands feel numb in February. And the window is cracked." Ms. Reeves nodded. "We'll talk about ventilation." They moved to the living room. The humidity read 58%, which Ms. Reeves called borderline sticky for a home. The wall behind the couch looked fine until the flashlight found stippled shadows like a map of a river delta. The moisture meter beeped on a patch that had been painted last winter. "Possible mold behind paint," Ms. Reeves said and tapped the baseboard. It sounded hollow. She noted it and moved on. In the bedroom, the air felt a degree colder and drier at first, and then the monitor registered something Lena could not see. A spurt of carbon monoxide. "Not enough to set off a store-bought alarm," Ms. Reeves said. "Enough to make the device clear its throat." Dr. Shah looked at the ceiling. The vent over the closet door was rust-streaked where condensation had tattooed it. "Basement?" Ms. Reeves asked. Lena led them down narrow stairs where the light bulb hung bare like a question mark. The furnace sat like a tired animal, older than the paint on the walls and more honest than the landlord. A metal flue rose from its back and jogged toward the chimney where, only a saint's guess ago, someone had repaired the connection with foil tape and good intentions. The tape had peeled like an old sticker. When the furnace cycled on, a thin bloom of exhaust puffed into the basement air before most of it found the flue. Ms. Reeves held out the carbon monoxide monitor. It chirped and then beeped, not like a fire engine, more like a person clearing their throat to tell you you've missed a step. She followed the flue with the instrument. At each elbow joint the number bumped. Near the chimney, a draft pulled the numbers down. Near the seam, they rose. "Negative pressure," Ms. Reeves said almost to herself. "English," Lena said, because the room tilted a little. "When the house is too sealed in some places and leaky in others," Ms. Reeves said, "and when the furnace and stove compete with the bathroom fan and the dryer vent, sometimes the air in the house pulls backwards. Exhaust that should go up the chimney sneaks back into the basement instead. If your bedroom's above this and if the floor has gaps, a little bit of that air comes up where you don't want it." "You're telling me the cough came up through the floor," Lena said, "like a story." "I'm telling you, your kid wasn't making it up," Ms. Reeves said gently. "And you weren't either. It was the kindness that did it, or maybe the slowness of the explanation, or maybe it was the way Dr. Shah had looked at the ceiling vent, as if it were a sentence he could read. Whatever it was, the room took a step to the left. The concrete under Lena's feet turned to something she couldn't name. The edges of her vision cinched down like a hood was being pulled. She sat, and then she wasn't sitting. And then she was aware of the cool grit of the basement floor against her palm. Tasha was beside her before anyone could call her name. "You're okay," she said. "You breathed weird, and your body decided to get your attention." Lena took the attention back. She blinked hard. Tears came without her having invited them. She didn't cry pretty. She cried like a woman who had not allowed herself to cry in front of strangers in a long time. She breathed through her mouth because her nose had made its own decisions. After a moment, she laughed once, which made the tears worse in the way a laugh sometimes does. "I'm sorry," she said, and then said it again with more force, as if apologizing to a committee. "No," Dr. Shah said quickly, hands half lifted as if to ward off the apology. "Please don't be. We brought instruments to measure invisible things. You've been sleeping on top of one for a year. Your body knows what it knows." "I thought I was crazy," Lena said, each word a small exhale. "Every night like a clock. I thought maybe it was me being dramatic, or her lungs not loving me back. And you—" She looked at him, and her voice softened in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with relief. "You came back." He nodded, the simplest action he could offer. He did not say, "I should have come sooner." He did not say, "I thought about you when I read a paper on a porch." He did not say, "Sometimes medicine is a house with rooms you don't enter for fear of what you'll find." He said, "We can fix a flue. We can fix a stove. We can unseal what should breathe and seal what should not. We can call a city inspector to write it down in ink that a landlord has to respect. Will you let us?" Lena laughed a small, incredulous sound. "You're asking me if I'll let you help me," she said. "I am 25 years old in this moment, and 60 the next. Yes, please. Write it down, so Mr. Klein can read it without moving his lips." They went back upstairs. Ms. Reeves tested the bathroom fan and declared it pitiful. She tested the dryer vent and found that it exhausted into the basement because the duct to the outside had fallen, then had been kindly tucked back behind a paint can like a secret. She looked at the gas water heater and said words that were too gentle for what she meant. She took pictures of the painted-over shadow behind the baseboard in the bedroom and wrote the words, "Suspected hidden mold due to wall cavity moisture," in a neat hand on her form. Tasha sat with Lena at the table and completed 3 forms in plain English. A request for emergency housing modification, a code violation complaint, a medical letter of necessity that tied the repairs to a child's health and thereby made the timeline shorter than a landlord's patience. Dr. Shah wrote a letter on clinic letterhead with his serious voice on paper, nocturnal cough, likely exacerbated by in-home NO2 and CO exposure and possible hidden mold due to subfloor and wall cavity leakage. Patient improves with relocation of sleep area. Urgent remediation required. He printed 2 copies and left one on the table like a legal instrument. "What happens now?" Lena asked, not because she doubted them, but because, for the first time in months, she could imagine future tense without bracing. "Now we call Mr. Klein," Ms. Reeves said, "and we ask him to be the landlord his mother thinks he is. If he fails to comply, the city will cite him and set a timeline. If he plays games, we bring legal aid." "And if he raises the rent by $50? Lena asked, already a step ahead in the chess game she hated playing. "Then we talk relocation," Tasha said, and her face did not look like pity. It looked like logistics. "Emergency vouchers exist for cases exactly like this. We don't promise palaces. We promise safer air." "Do you promise that my child will stop coughing?" Lena asked, a question she had not allowed herself because a yes would have broken her worse than a no. "We promise, Doctor," Shah said, and he did not hedge because medicine is sometimes a series of ifs, but he had enough data and enough anger to upgrade it to a when. When the air stops being mean, her lungs will forget how to be scared. Monique called Mr. Klein. He was courteous for the first 2 minutes, then defensive for 5, then promised a man by Friday. Monique documented each promise as if the phone had ears that listened to forms. Tasha messaged legal aid. Dr. Shah sent his letter through the clinic's fax because some machines still only spoke fluent squeal. Then they sat. It is a strange thing, to sit in the place where you've been fighting a private fight and find 3 people willing to fight publicly with you. Lena poured coffee into mugs that did not match. Ms. Reeves took hers black. Tasha took hers milky with 2 sugars. Dr. Shah did the thing seasoned doctors do when they let their bodies be seen. He took a deep breath and let it out in front of a patient. "Why did you come back?" Lena asked, not to trap him, not to flatter him, just to tilt a prism toward understanding. He looked past her, at the corner where the baseboard had been foamed, at the window plastic that had given up trying to be taught, at the purple pony poster that didn't belong to the kind of childhood he wished for Maya. "Because you told me where your kid sleeps," he said simply. "Because I heard a cough in my head that sounded like an engine that wouldn't start, and I couldn't turn the key and drive away." Lena put her head in her hands, not in despair, but in the most animal kind of relief, one that turns the body down to its basic settings. She didn't faint this time. She didn't apologize. She let herself be a person for whom help was not a rumor. The room, stubbornly, became a kitchen again. They left with promises that had dates. They left with forms that had case numbers. They left a copy of the monitor's numbers on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. When the door closed, Lena stood in the room that had made her feel small and let herself feel tall for the first time since the first cough. She looked at the ceiling and said, to no one and to everyone, "We're not crazy." At 2 that afternoon, the city inspector called. At 4, Mr. Klein texted a photo of coils of new duct and a furnace guy's card. At 7, Lena sat in the living room with the window cracked just a finger and waited not for the cough, but for the sense that someone else, somewhere else, had their hand on the other end of the rope. Repairs in old buildings are a little like apologies from men who have delayed them. They start loud, then slow, then, if you are lucky, stick. On Friday morning, a man with clean boots and a respectful cough arrived with a dolly and lengths of proper double-wall vent pipe. He did not comment on the toys on the floor or the hairline crack in the sink. He went straight to the basement and did things with levels and screws that sounded like control returning to the house. He took down the peeling foil tape and replaced the flue elbow with a piece that fit like it belonged to this century. He reconnected the dryer vent to the exterior hood and sealed it where it passed through the sill. He turned on the furnace, watched smoke pellets travel up the chimney like well-behaved ghosts, and nodded once. He left a printed checklist with a logo and his name, which Lena folded like a diploma and put beside Dr. Shah's letter. On Monday, another man came to open the wall behind the baseboard. He cut the painted drywall with a knife, and the sweet smell under the paint rolled out like a memory you'd rather not keep. Behind it, dark sheetrock bloomed with a pattern that made Ms. Reeves, who had come to observe, say, "There it is," in a voice that managed to be both clinical and angry. The man wore a mask, sealed the room with plastic sheeting, and carried out bags with caution. He showed Lena the rusted old pipe that ran in the cavity and the tiny seam at a joint where a slow leak had turned into an art project for mold. "You were right," he said, and the simple sentence softened something in her ribs. They replaced the run with new pipe. They treated the wood. They put up new drywall. They told her to keep the bed 6 inches off the wall. They apologized for the mess. Mr. Klein, standing in the doorway with a clipboard and a look that suggested a man trying to become the man a piece of paper needed him to be, signed an acknowledgement with a pen that shook a little. The Healthy Homes program returned with their devices. NO2 peaks lower now and briefly high only when the stovetop ran without the new hood fan. CO minimal. Humidity a reasonable 45%. The moisture meter in the bedroom showed numbers that were not newsworthy. Maya came home from school and looked around, suspicious of order where Drama had recently lived. She slept that night in her own bed, a space reintroduced to her like a cousin from out of town. At 1 in the morning, Lena woke automatically and lay there, listening like a mother who has learned the topography of quiet. The cough did not come. The radiator clicked its bracelet once, and then behaved. The building breathed without wheezing. In the morning, Lena put the notebook back on the table and drew a line between December and October, the way a person draws a line in the sand. She wrote, "No cough last night, window closed, hood fan on while boiling water for oatmeal." Maya laughed at Zuzu's tale. To pay attention is to breathe. She did not know why she wrote that sentence. It felt like the end of something and the start of something else that didn't need to be named. The city inspector returned and wrote the words, "in compliance," on a form that looked bored by Drama. Legal aid sent a letter to Mr. Klein, reminding him that retaliatory rent increase had a definition and consequences. Mr. Klein sent Lena a text that read, "Rent remains same through lease term. Thanks for patience." It was the nicest thing he had ever written to her. Tasha came by with a roll of blue painter's tape and labeled the new hood fan switch in both English and Spanish. "You should not have to do the building's job for it," she said, "but let's not allow silly obstacles, the dignity of tripping us." Dr. Shah did a follow-up visit at the clinic, this time with a smile he didn't try to stifle. Maya's lungs sounded like a room with the windows open in May. He asked her to blow into the peak flow meter and grinned at the number. "That's a good candle blow," he said. "How's reading?" "Better," Maya said, and then, proud as a cat, "I read the posters on the bus now." Lena brought the notebook. He turned pages, more careful than a person would be with a photo album, and read the entries as if checking vitals. He looked up at Lena. "You did the brave thing," he said. You noticed and you insisted. You did not apologize yourself out of your own home. I fainted in my basement, Lena said, a smile catching at one corner of her mouth. Bodies will choose their own punctuation, he said. Mine did last week on the stairs when I tried to take them two at a time. He told her something else then. He told her that he had put in a request with the clinic leadership to start a standard set of questions for every cough and wheeze that began with, "Where do you sleep? And what do you cook with? And what does your heater sound like?" He told her they were ordering 10 portable monitors for home loans. He told her that sometimes change is 60 pages of policy, and sometimes it is one question at the right moment. Lena listened and felt the warm, unfamiliar sensation of being at the center of helpful things. She thought about the quiet that had settled into the house. It wasn't silence. Life didn't do silence in a building with 3 other families and a dog upstairs that ran in place when its owner petted it. It was quiet of a different kind, the absence of dread. She found herself humming as she made eggs. She found she could sit and drink her coffee while it was still hot, not because she had fewer chores, but because one particular chore, listening for the cough, had retired without a party. There were still obstacles. The electric bill frowned at her for the hours the hood fan ran. The school sent home a note asking for $2 for a field trip that felt like 20. The laundry baskets disagreed with gravity twice a week. But the house no longer argued with her lungs. That counted for more than the bills could tabulate. In November, Lena stood at a folding table at a tenants' meeting at the library and told a room full of women and 2 men what had happened in her house. She didn't use policy words. She said, "My kid coughed like an engine at night. The doctor listened like a person. The city measured what we were breathing. The landlord fixed what he should have fixed in 2005. And now we sleep." She held up her little notebook, like a charm against gaslighting. A woman in the back with a scarf tied tight under her chin raised her hand and asked, "Who do you call?" Lena said their names and wrote the numbers on the whiteboard. Clinic, Healthy Homes, Legal Aid. She said the other thing out loud. If someone tells you it's in your head, write it down anyway. Bodies are good at telling the truth. Paper helps them get heard. Doctor. Shah came late to the meeting, standing in the doorway with his coat still buttoned, because doctors are always moving between rooms. He didn't speak. He looked like a person listening to a song he recognized as his, but knew wasn't about him. After, he shook Lena's hand, as if they had signed a treaty neither felt the need to frame. Winter came again and tried to be what it had been. The duct held, the baseboard stayed dry. The pony poster uncurled a little, as if even paper can learn to relax. Lena lit a candle in December, a real one with a clean wick, and laughed when the smell reminded her of nothing but cinnamon. She opened the window for 5 minutes after cooking and thought of it not as defeat, but as a habit, like flossing or calling your mother back. On Christmas Eve, she took a new notebook out of the dollar store bag and wrote on the first page, "Home is the air you don't notice." She placed the old notebook beside it, not as an indictment, but as a record. She tucked Dr. Shah's letter into a clear folder with Mr. Klein's compliance paper and Ms. Reeves's report, and slid it in the drawer under the oven mitts. She smiled at the location, which felt like both a joke and a ritual, the place where heat and hands meet. She also wrote a note to herself and stuck it to the fridge with the strawberry magnet. Ask, "Where do you sleep?" to everyone who tells you a story. She meant it for Maya's teachers, for the women at the laundromat, for herself, when she forgot that problems often had addresses. That night, when the radiator clicked its 2 clicks, Lena did not tense. She put her hand on Maya's back as the child sighed into sleep and felt the even rise and fall of breath. She thought of Monique's orange bag and Tasha's steady voice and a young doctor who had not let a winter symptom become an old sentence. She thought of how her own body had laid her down on the basement floor like a protest, and how, when she stood up again, she had chosen to be loud where paperwork listens. Outside, the street did what streets do in winter. They held up cars, and lovers in coats, and men whose jokes wore hats, and women who knew where to be. Inside, a small family slept. In the space where a cough had kept time, there was now room for dreams to use the clock. The building, old and honest, breathed without complaint. The house had learned a new habit, quiet, and in that quiet lived a different kind of sound, the soft, deep collapse of a mother's fear into something that looked a lot like trust.